Press preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories here on Sky News this evening. And the Prime Minister has said police should investigate a former officer who told the media that pornography was found on Damian Green's computer in 2008. A man who visited Downing Street as a senior aide to the Ukrainian Prime Minister has been arrested in Kiev on suspicion of being a Russian spy. Votes are being counted in Catalonia following the region's election. So far, it looks like pro-independence parties could be on course to join together to secure a majority. We're expecting the results imminently, and we'll bring them to you just as soon as we get them. A very warm welcome to the press preview, of course, our first look at what's on those front pages as they arrive. In the next half an hour, we'll be taking a look at what's making the headlines with the Observer's chief leader writer, Sonia Sodha, and the political journalist, Isabel Oakeshott. With you guys in just a second, but let's take a run through the front pages that we actually have, starting with the Times. It reports that the head of the Metropolitan Police Federation has joined Conservative MPs in condemning the leaks which brought down Damian Green. Here's the Telegraph. It leads on comments from Boris Johnson saying he described the sacked former First Secretary as the victim of a police vendetta. The Eye suggests that the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, has ambitions to become Deputy Prime Minister. The Guardian goes with the headline, NHS operations axed to avert winter crisis. The Financial Times reports on Boeing's attempt at a takeover of a leading Brazilian aerospace firm in an attempt to keep pace with its biggest rival, Airbus. As it so often does, the Express is leading with a health story, this time reporting on an apparent breakthrough in the treatment of Alzheimer's. Here's the Mirror. It leads on the Ukrainian government aide accused of spying for the Kremlin. The Sun leads on the apparent return of the blue British passport. Photo of Meghan and Harry also on the front page of the Metro. No article for them, instead the very sweet photo of the in-loves. The Star's take on that photo shoot, though, well, rather less sweet. We might avoid the Star, but we will be discussing other front pages with Sonia Sodha and Isabel Oakeshott. Very good evening to you both. And shall we start with the front of the Telegraph? This vendetta that is being conducted, according to Boris Johnson, against Damian Green. Is this a smokescreen by the Conservatives?
I don't think it really is. I think there's been an ongoing theme with the Conservatives and the police for many years now. You know, you think back to what happened to Andrew Mitchell, who was then the chief whip over the so-called Plebgate affair. He took the step of taking the police to court, well, taking newspapers to court over libel on that one and lost. But there's a lot of running sores between the Conservative Party and the police, and you set that against a backdrop of cuts to police funding, and you know that sets the scene for quite a bitter kind of backdrop to what is a very human drama with Damian Green and whether he should or shouldn't have had to resign over this question of whether he did or didn't possess pornography and look at pornography on an office computer in the Commons.
There isn't a question, though, of whether or not he should have resigned. He lied about it, didn't he?
Well, absolutely, and as always, it's the lie that gets you rather than the fact of the matter. And I think this is a huge blow to Theresa May. As she said in her letter to Damian Green, they've been friends for so many years, right back to university. It was a very personal relationship with him and a big blow for her to have to let him go. But in the end, she didn't have a choice. He lied.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with Isabel that I think whatever sort of side of the political spectrum you come from, you sort of look at the police actions here, and I think there is something to be concerned about. But I think you can both think that there's something to be concerned about in the police conduct of this, and it's not just politicians who have expressed concern. Actually, I think quite a lot of the senior police establishment have said that they're very concerned about how this, you know, this evidence from the raid of Damian Green's office 8 years ago sort of came to light when it should have remained confidential and behind closed doors. But I think you can have concerns about that, but also think that it was absolutely right for Damian Green to resign because the inquiry, the investigation, the Cabinet Office investigation, found that he did make misleading statements. He knew that there was porn on their computers because the police had told him, and he said that he didn't know, and that is really troubling conduct. So I think he really did have to go. I do think, coming back to the smokescreen point, I do think that some of his supporters will have been quite almost sort of, you know, they may have breathed a sigh of relief when actually the police came out and started talking about this stuff, because it really did move the focus away from the initial allegations that were made against Damian Green by the activist Kate Maltby. Yeah. And the story really did shift quite quickly at that moment, I think, from questions about inappropriate conduct with a young activist to these questions about the police and pornography.
Still, even if there were a vendetta against Damian Green, it's by no means certain that there is. I mean, the police serve the crown, they don't serve politicians. And I wonder whether there's a parallel between the situation that we're talking about now and, you know, politicians having a pop at the judiciary, which we've seen a couple of times over the past 12 months.
I don't think there is really a parallel. I mean, the question marks here are, why are retired police officers coming out with confidential information from many, many years ago? Why did they do that?
Well, the argument would be it's in the public interest.
Well, I don't really see what the public interest here is in Damian Green having pornography on an office computer. He didn't do anything illegal. Now, it turned into a public interest story because he lied about it. But that doesn't give you a cover for having released the information in the first place. And that is why I think questions are being asked.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because if this information had come out by other means, so for example, if a member of the public had been in his office and seen that there was pornography on his computer, or one of his members of staff complained about it, then in many workplaces, having porn on a computer and you know, if there's some evidence that you yourself looked at it, that would very much be a sackable offence. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's so tricky here. We're talking about the resignation of a minister over whether or not he told the truth. And there are also questions about how this evidence came out. But in other circumstances, for somebody in a normal workplace, having porn on their workplace computer would be a sackable offence.
Just want to pause there just for a second and bring viewers first pictures from Barcelona, but also the news that Carles Puigdemont's party has claimed victory for what's being described as the separatist bloc in the regional election. Well, these are the celebrations ongoing amongst those pro-independence Catalans. Puigdemont, of course, himself in Brussels and probably remaining there for quite some time. Just to pick both your brains on this developing story. I mean, a majority in the Catalan parliament for independence is one thing. If one party had got it, well, there would be a huge amount more weight on Madrid to actually do something about it. But do we think Rajoy is likely to take this election result and move forward with anything that will please those who will form a majority in the Catalan parliament?
Well, I'm not sure this is going to change anything, really, because if you look at how Madrid have handled this so far, I mean, I don't think either side in this dispute have handled it particularly well. You know, the Puigdemont, in the way that he's kind of handled, you know, having a referendum that wasn't official, that wasn't signed off by the Madrid government on independence, but also the way that Madrid was so heavy-handed in the way that they went in, that they sent, you know, police officers in to sort of, who manhandled people who were voting in that referendum. So I'm not sure that this election result is going to change very much in terms of the standoff.
No, I would agree with that.
Let's return, shall we, to the story here in the UK, and of course one of the biggest problems that Theresa May has is who fills Damian Green's shoes. You know, he sat on so many of those kind of Brexit committees operating out the cabinet.
Although up to a point you don't necessarily need a Deputy Prime Minister. There's actually sort of a relatively new post. I mean, there hasn't always been a Deputy Prime Minister as such. Sometimes there's been de facto. You know, John Prescott filled that role under Labour.
Still, this is interesting.
Loving the Jeremy Hunt thing. Loving that, because where has that come from? I mean, Jeremy Hunt has been around for a very long time. It's not to say he doesn't have a big enough job running the health service. I remember sort of 10 years ago when he was seen as an upcoming potential future leader, and then his star kind of faded. And it's interesting to see that he is tipping himself, or is someone else tipping him as Deputy Prime Minister? I slightly find that a bit of a stretch. You know, much as I think Jeremy is fantastic politician, I think he's a very good communicator, and even Sonia, I think, agrees that he does passionately care about the health service.
Yeah, I think he's I think he's probably seen as a steady pair of hands. May will see him as a steady pair of hands. He has dealt with some quite tricky issues. For example, the junior doctor dispute. I think within government he was seen to have handled that well, although I think junior doctors would probably disagree with that.
I think so.
But I think within government, within the cabinet, he's probably seen as a safe pair of hands, and maybe that's why...
But why would you move him from DOH? Why would you move him from health then?
I'm not
sure.
would.
And I think, you know, he's always said that he wants to stay in health. I think there probably are many in the health service who would like to see him moved, although probably I would be careful what you wish for, because I think there are conservative... and I think there are conservative politicians out there who would do more damage to the NHS. But yeah,
I just let you get away with that. You just said it, and you know what? It's Christmas, and I'm just not going to do the NHS round.
Full of mince pies and mulled wine this evening, the pair of you, obviously. I mean, but as you were suggesting, though, Isabel, the key thing is not necessarily the DPM job. It's who Theresa May puts in to chair those cabinet committees on Brexit.
Absolutely. And also, I think one really kind of bizarre observation is just how many bad things can happen to Theresa May, and she just keeps going. You know, it feels to me like we've gone back to almost the days of Jeremy Corbyn, where half of his shadow cabinet were walking out and he just staggered on, and now he's stabilised. And you know, after the conference, after party conference, Tory MPs were saying Theresa she's only got one more mistake, one more disaster, and she's out. Well, we've had multiple. You know,
I don't think anything's going to shake. I think she's probably around for a few more years yet, possibly till the next general election, actually. And I think one of the reasons for that is that MPs she's treading a very fine tightrope between the left of her party, between the right of her party, between the DUP. But I don't think MPs in her party want to rock the boat too much, partly because the Brexiters think, I think, that she's the best chance they've got of delivering Brexit, but no one wants a general election.
I'm not sure they really do think that, but there's nobody else who's in pole position. That's the issue.
I just want to bring in very quickly this story on the front page of the Times, and I wonder whether that's a slightly overblown headline. The Russian spy infiltrating Number 10. He walked up Downing Street and was brought in. But to be fair, someone, along with the Ukrainian Prime Minister, at a time when clearly NATO, Russia, there are issues around it.
I feel the surname Yezov might have been a potential alarm bell there that possibly didn't get properly investigated.
It might be a Ukrainian. I think it's probably a Ukrainian surname as well, isn't it? I don't know. Anyway, but yes, it's. I mean, he's a suspected Russian spy, but it's pretty incredible that this man was there translating conversations between the Prime Minister and the Ukrainian Prime Minister, who were talking about their approach to the Kremlin, potential sanctions for the Kremlin, and apparently this spy, according to Ukrainian security services, they're alleging that he's been passing stuff back to Russia, which would be a pretty major security flaw if it turned out to be true.
I mean, we know the Russians are very, very good at this type of thing, but actually, in the grander scheme of things, the concern on the part of the security services is, to whom was he speaking? Who has he been giving that information to?
And I think this is just a kind of symbol of a much wider thing that's going on here. The Russians are incredibly clever about the extent to which they're infiltrating every level of society for their own ends. It doesn't cost so much. I mean, we saw this last week with, how much did they spend on Facebook, where it was 70 pence or something like that. This is subtle. It's not necessarily expensive. They find their useful idiots or their entree into things, and then they're exploiting that for very, very clever ends.
Well, let's pause there, shall we? Plenty to talk about after the break. And that's the front page of the Metro. We will be examining that. There are a number of varying takes, to say the least, on Harry and Meghan's engagement photos after this.